That was wonderful, Trevor.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And thank you for having us in your home today.
Oh, thanks for coming. My place of pleasure.
Yeah. A lot of time spent out here, I bet.
A lot of time.
Would you like to give us the grand tour?
Yeah. Over here in the corner is all my auxiliary equipment, which provides a lot of, you know, the reverbs, compression, noise gates, delays, any kind of environment you want to create. And a large part of my guitar sound comes from there. The A3 Korg is a particular piece which I really like, and because you can really customize your sounds. They give you all the basic sounds, and then if you're going in and recreating your own patches, provides for a really unique, your own kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the A1 is another Korg piece which I use a lot as well. In conjunction with those two, that really provides me with just about all the kind of sound parameters I need to cover.
So you can just instantly plug in and get that that tone instead of setting up your rig and
exactly
making all the time to mic.
It's a drag having to set up amplifiers and things. So here it's all all at hand.
Yeah. And obviously behind you is a mixing board. How many channels do you have?
Actually, I'm upgrading it. I'm going to have tons of channels real soon. But I mean, this is an example of. I think it's really important to have an understanding for a guitarist who's starting out to really, when he start also learning engineering, get to know it, because it's a really important aspect of playing, I think, today. You know, I used to do tons of sessions, and invariably I'd walk into the control room afterwards and listen to it, and it would be really like, oh God, I thought it was much cooler than that, you know. And I realized that really you're at the mercy of the engineer. And so I really spent some time, you know, learning how to engineer, and in doing that, you learn which the best microphones are for your particular style, even as far as when at a more advanced stage, what equalizers are good for which guitars, and you know, where you can zone in what's sweet at this frequency, what's sweet at that frequency, what are the best compressors to use, and how to manipulate them, because very often you're getting into a studio and you know, the engineer has no sensitivity towards what you're doing, and then you're at his mercy. But if you can go there and say, I want a bit of this and a bit of that, and which mics to use, and also, you know, don't use 1,000 mics because you have phase problems. There's all kinds of things to get into, and I think it's a real important area. Don't just stop the checklist at picks, guitars and strings, you know.
Yeah. When you're playing your opening piece, I noticed you were watching the screen a lot.
Yeah, this is a program written by a company called DigiDesign. It's Pro Tools, and you know, for a long time keyboard players have had sequences, but guitarists have never had sequences unless you want to go and get a MIDI guitar, which, as you know, doesn't have the feel of a guitar, and that was always a problem. And you know, I play keyboards, but I so often was frustrated because in order to play guitar, you have to stripe up a tape, and then you don't have the flexibility on tape as you do with a sequencer, where in the sequencer you can move things any way you want. You can do that with this. So for example, here's a guitar part, just a 2-bar sequence I'll play to you. The black waveform is what I'm going to play. And that's the whole sample. And I wanted, you know, to loop that. So I recreate that, and copying it is as easy as just pressing paste and, you know, cut and paste. And you can have that go as many times as you want, put it wherever you want. So you can take guitar parts, cut them up, and reintroduce them and do all kinds of things as you would with a keyboard sequencer. So this has been, for me, revolutionary, and it really has impacted on my songwriting and many areas of what I do. Very useful tool.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, you're getting so many interesting tones out of the acoustic guitar on the opening piece.
Yeah, you know, one of the fallacies that I've been brought up to not believe anymore is that, you know, distorted fuzzbox can't be used on an acoustic guitar. And, you know, I really enjoy getting different sounds by adding some of that in, you know, changing the character of the guitar. So rather than just having a clean acoustic, you're adding in this other thing which provides almost a violinistic character to the guitar.
Yeah, it did sound like a violin.
Yeah, so in fact, the clean sound If you were to just listen to the clean sound, it would be. And then adding this in just gives it a.
Really
varying
sings,
degrees.
sings.
You know, so it's very different to the normal acoustical sound.
So basically, you just have the echo and the reverb, but just adding the fuzz.
Just adding that, and you know, and also dimension is so important. You know, creating the right dimension to suit whatever the piece is. You know, sometimes I also find that with an electric guitar, just plugging straight in and clean with no chorusing, no nothing, just maybe a little bit of reverb, but absolutely nothing else is also one of the best hidden secrets, because everyone is so caught up in this effect and that effect, and sometimes the best effect is no effect, you know.
And speaking of effects,
yes,
is this on the floor? Is this your pedal board you use on stage?
Yeah, in fact, let me change guitars for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, this one I've been using this for quite some time, and it's useful for someone with a bad memory, because what happens is sometimes in the middle of a show I'll forget what song I'm going to, and this this unit is made by Bob Bradshaw on Rocktron. You can actually put the names of the songs in the unit.
So it reads out on
it reads out in sequence. So you know, the first song on the last tour was Yours Is No Disgrace. The second one I've forgotten, so I'll have a look now. Ah, Rhythm of Love.
Oh, okay.
And so you can actually go through, and then you have per song there's 10 settings or 5, however many you want. And it's so convenient, because the song will start, this will be the first tone, and then the second thing, and then the third thing, then.
Wow.
And just.
So this is just the switching system triggering your.
This is really just a huge remote control telling the rig what to do.
Yeah, your rack of units.
A rack of units with MIDI changes. Basically, it's a MIDI system, and it just changes all the effects by way of MIDI. It changes everything from reverb to delay, level changes, equalizer. I mean, every setting has a different EQ to it. I also almost got to the point, but it was just too much to deal with. Once I got to know, which I've now got to know all the halls, for example, in North America, to design the settings.
Tweak it a little bit.
For each hall, but really? You know, it was really a drag. And then the halls changed sound, and you can't complain about that. You know, I'm not playing here; the sound's changed. But you can really manipulate this to do just about anything.
What was that wobbling one you had? I think it was setting 5 on.
Setting 5,
Yours
yeah.
Is No Disgrace.
Yeah, that's on the eventide. You can set it up to basically shift in fifths, and it's quite useful if you're doing this kind of thing. Then you switch that on, and it has a very weird effect.
Sounds like 3 guitarists at once.
Yeah, exactly. People think I'm amazing when I play with that thing. Little do they know. And then, you know, where's that? Yeah, for Rhythm of Love is a song where on the record I double tracked the solo in thirds. And obviously I can't do that live, so I put a major third on, and what the solo would normally be would be, and with the third here you can get the authentic thing. And then going back to just changing out of there. And once you've done that, you go to the next song and it tells you what it is. I'm trying to get it to play for me, but it won't do that. So it's a really good system.
So that's you said thirds. Is that just parallel thirds for everything?
That was parallel thirds, yeah. And it's kind of, that's one of the difficult things. Like, for example, the solo of let me get to it. Of Ona Valeni Hart. Where is that now? I think it's here. Now that's fifths, as you know. The thing is, you can't just play any fifths. You can't just play a chord, because it's going to sound really weird. So it's good to have an understanding of harmonies, and knowing that, for example, playing just a major third with a fifth on top is going to result in a major seventh.
You're playing D and F sharp.
I'm playing D and F sharp, and it's giving you A and C sharp on top of that, so you're getting yourself a major seventh. And so it gives us, it has a lot of applications if you just really get into the harmonics and try and remember where it's going harmonically. Then it can be a very useful tool as well. What else is there here? Then the chorusing sounds, I like to use just an old Korg chorus pedal, and then spread it in stereo with the eventide for a song like Changes.
So that first row that's easy to get to is for the memory banks for the songs.
Yeah, the first row is really the actual presets, the comprehensive changes. And so, for example, if I go from Lift Me Up, we're on now. If I go from preset 1 to preset 2, I hit 2 and 3 and 4, and a lot of different things change. On top of that, if something happened where you were on, say, preset 2 and there's a Yamaha compressor in there, you didn't want that for some reason, you can go to the individual settings and switch them off. So you're not stuck with any sound. You can always change it and manipulate it while you're going along.
So that's about how many things you have in your rack then? All those switches?
Yeah. There's about
16?
About 16, yeah. And obviously each, like the delays, each time I change, because I love these delays. Once again, a Korg delay, but it has a real analog feel. They don't even make it anymore. It's a Korg 2000. It has such a warm sound, and it can go up to 4 seconds delay. So if I need to go to the bathroom, I can. I can.
So is there any setting that you find yourself using the most? Quite a bit?
For soloing, I use a little bit of chorusing on an eventide. Sorry about the chair. A little bit of chorusing on the eventide. Once again, the Korg delay, and I've always got a hush unit in for the noise, and then a little Korg fuzz box, which works great. Always at a Roland. I can't even remember. It's been a long time since I opened the drawer where the small stuff is. And then the EQ, and it's kind of the more majestic kind of.
Through what amps are you using on stage now?
I've been changing amps for quite. I used Marshall for years and years and years, and then I came across these Ampeg VT120s, and I fell in love with them. They're just real clean. They tube amps, and but they're real clean, and they have a real warm sound to them. And I find that they're consistent. So if one goes out, you don't have to, although I'm contradicting myself a little bit, because I've designed my sound that I don't really have to rely too much on the organic sound of the amp. In other words, how the tubes how the tubes react to being smacked really hard, and how the speakers react to that, and how the pushing of air helps or works with them. I've kind of designed the sound so the sound has really been realized before it hits the speakers. But then it's, having said that, it is critical to have an amp that can really take all those changes, and the Ampeg, I think, is a great amp.
And that way you're safe too, because you have all your sounds in your rack, and you can use a spare amp or something.
If it goes out, and it's not going to sound identical, but at least I'm going to be able to play. I mean, I remember one time I was playing Les Paul quite a lot. I was still using a Strat before I got my Love here, but. I was using a Les Paul a lot, and one night I was playing, and the amp went out, and they put another amp on stage, and my spare had been stolen actually the same day. So an amp came on stage I'd never seen before, and we just plugged into it, and it was a nightmare. We had an hour left for the show, and I was just was really the worst experience. There was no sound, you know, it was impossible to play. It wasn't loud enough, it had no meat, it had nothing. So it was kind of around then, about 15 years ago, that I decided I'm going to get the sound, so if I plug into a radio, it's going to happen. You know? But having said that, the Ampeg really complement the sound. The Ampeg VT120s are good.
And you mentioned your love. It's an
Yeah,
Alvarez?
yeah, it's funny. Tom Presley from St. Louis Music, who they used to have West Tone guitars. They've changed the name since to Alvarez, and they had a model called a Pantera, and he hand built one. And I met him, and this was it. And he said to me, "Take it home and try it." And I did, and I didn't play it that much. I was still so connected to my Strat. And then I slowly started playing it more. Now I can't put it down. I mean, I think it's an incredible guitar. It's got all the warmth, and it's speed-wise and consistency-wise. I mean, a lot of guitars you'll play, it'll sound real chunky down here, and you get up here and it disappears.
Yeah.
This guitar's really consistent from right up top E here to down to the bottom E. And that's really what I like about it. In fact, we've developed it now, and there's a signature model coming out, really based primarily on this design.
Oh, good.
So that should be out soon. So I'm in love with this guitar. It's great.
Trevor, you have a really unique way of blending together major and minor ideas. For instance, in the opening number, I think the synthesizer was playing D and A, you know, just root
The
fifth.
Yeah, yeah.
And you were going back and forth from D major ideas to D minor ideas?
Yeah, you know, having it just D with a fifth allows me to go from one to the other. It's real useful. I enjoy working with I tend to lean towards the harmonic minor scale. It has a real kind of lyrical, and the leading back in there.
Yeah, the major seventh.
The major seventh is really nice, and it really works nicely when you're doing that to the pentatonic scale, which is obviously the. So you get so they work really well together. So I kind of lean towards. I use those a lot. Those two scales tend to work really well for me. And then, you know, in the same piece it goes to F, and you can use D pentatonic in F major, so you can be going from very good.
Because at that point comes F major pentatonic.
Right, right.
So that section was going F major chord to a D.
Back to D.
D the fifth. Just a
D the fifths, and
right.
I was leaning towards going from the F, where you're really playing. I was playing a major on the F, and utilizing obviously D pentatonic, D minor, D pentatonic on that, and in going back to the D, I accentuated the major. So we got the on the D minor. Back to the major.
The major third of D.
The major third of D.
Yeah.
So you're breaking away from the minor there.
Getting back to the section where it hangs out on D a lot, you do a little idea in a minor, like use the minor third and then go to the major third.
Right, right.
It's just, you like give an example of something like that.
Well,
and it fits. It just
yeah, it's just changing without anything at the bottom changing.
Yeah. So many guitarists think they just have to stay. Well, I have to stay in minor this whole section.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, once again, just having having a little bit of an understanding of harmony allows you to be a little more confident in doing those kind of things. And you know, if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. You know, that's how you can learn. And when in doubt, go chromatic. You'll always come out okay.
Oh, so for instance, like a simple pentatonic idea and add?
Yeah, I've found it's got me out of a lot of troubles. If we were working in A, for example, and you know, I landed up on an F. Okay. It doesn't work, but you can go.
Yeah.
You just keep going chromatic until you hit the right note. You know. So it's a very useful thing to use.
Make something good out of a mistake.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. Chromaticism until you find the right note.
Right. It's like a bridge. I look at chromatic scale like a bridge. It just leads you to the right place.
There were numerous spots in the song too that used some lightning fast passages.
Mm-hmm.
How did you originally develop, your speed?
Well, just obviously playing a lot, but also as far as practicing, just normal scales. A lot of pentatonic, throws you across the neck faster than some scales that take more than 2 notes a string.
Right.
And also, working with a metronome, I think, is real important. Starting off real slow, get the metronome going, and even with pentatonic, start off and then back again, and then maybe developing it a little, throwing it. And I recommend not going to high speed until you can do it really consistently with a metronome.
Yeah.
Keep it slow until it's really consistent and equal and even.
So if you practice perfectly your execution, you'll play.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
perfectly.
Exactly. And then the right hand's real important as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a tendency these days for players when they're doing a run to not use the right hand a lot, so they'll go and you can hear it's not all being played, but I think it has a much nicer tone if if you're actually using the pick. And a lot of
note.
Yeah, and an exercise which if I'm just sitting down watching TV, I'll just sit and go, and then up and down. And some of it I got from drumming with the paradiddles, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right.
Yeah.
I'd go. I would dub it a bit so you can get a bit. And then also doing it on one string. And using actual drum rudiments for the right hand I found useful. But there's another element for there to be clarity, and sound and tone is such a key to it. To have a tone that's pleasing, and to me tone sucks you in as much as anything else. If a guy's got a great tone, if a guy doesn't have a good tone, no matter what he's playing, it tends not to draw people in.
Yeah.
If the tone's great, it's much easier to say, well, I'm going to listen to this. I want to listen to this.
Yeah, it's very important that a lot of players overlook.
Yeah, yeah.
And what kind of pick are you using there?
I use a shark fin. It's a Swedish guy, an old Swedish guy makes these, and it's a weird pick because a lot of guitarists use these 2 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I use 3 fingers, and the reason for that, a very light pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm strumming lightly, I'll just hold it normally. But if I want to get a real hard edge to it, then I can kind of bend it around like that.
Oh.
And it provides
It bites into it.
It bites into it. Also for this kind of, I use the edge, which is serrated, and it really gives it makes it chunk a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's a very useful pick, and they never break. And with a lot of picks, I've found that after you've used it for a while, the feel of it doesn't changes. The texture changes and becomes a bit rough, and this stays consistent. And I try and I lose them all the time, but I try and keep the same one as long as I can, because it gets better with age. But it all works together with the strings. I have a very light action. I use 008 to 038 on the strings.
Very light.
So it's a very light action. On the electric, on the acoustic, I start at 009. Sometimes I go to 10. if I'm in a good mood, I'll go to 10. It's a little harder to bend. But I tend to go for a pretty light action.
So you're very close to the neck. Your strings are very close.
Very close, very low action,
and all the way up. They have them set so they're close all the way up the neck.
It's close all the way up, and the only thing I had a problem years ago was, and you've got to be careful of this if you play a Fender, is if you lift the pickups too high and the strings too low, your octave has a weird kind of out of tune thing, which happens because of the magnets being so close to the string. So that's something to look out for, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't recommend the light action. It's really down to choice. You know, I mean, a lot of you use heavier strings. A lot of people use heavier strings, and that's really just subjective. I use them because I've used them for a long time, and I tend to enjoy playing with lighter strings.
Having such low action, is it hard to bend sometimes, or is that the reason?
Yeah, the bending is easier, but there's two things that's affected if your strings are lighter, I've found. But I've lived with that compromise because I enjoy playing with them. One is your sustain is somewhat lessened because, you know, the tighter the tauter the string, the better it is for sustain. So I've had to find other ways around the sustain thing, and that's why, you know, the engineering thing becomes a very important part of it. Right. The other thing I've found is with light strings is your speed can be affected because it's like an elastic band, you know, whereas with heavier strings you hit the string and it kind of stays there. So it can, you know, it takes some getting used to, because if you're not used to it, it kind of can feel sloppy and a little bit inefficient as far as speed goes. But once you're used to it, you can get over that problem.
So in using the lighter gauge strings, how do you compensate for sustain?
Various ways. One of the primary things that helps that is compression. And once again, the whole thing of knowing something about engineering, sound engineering, knowing which threshold and the ratio, and you know what threshold, what ratio to use on certain things. And it's just a good idea to learn a bit about compression. And then, for example, if we're playing something like putting the compressor in, it just makes it
jumps out.
Just makes it jump out much smoother, and that's primarily the best way that I get over the lighter strings.
Yeah, I found a lot of players tend to make that jump out with distortion. I think, are making it jump out by using distortion, and it just doesn't.
It muddles.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So a little bit of knowledge of technology really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I really strongly recommend that.
Yeah, I noticed there's you know, when you bend strings, sometimes you bend maybe a half step and then a whole step up, like in that solo, for instance.
Right. Well, one of the things that I do is rather than just go up the scale, I'll bend it up and.
Yeah.
And so it has a nice kind of. Also, at the beginning of the solo, I like the note choice because I'm playing a ninth instead of just coming straight in with. You know, I'm gonna. So you've got the ninth starting off, which is an interesting note.
What key are we in?
We're in E major. Okay. I'm starting on an F sharp. So that's also a different kind of bend. You know, going from the fifth up to the sixth, bending up with the first finger. And then once again, a semitone bend.
Yeah, that's not it.
And that's one part where the whammy bar is really a crutch, because I can't really get the right kind of vibrato up there, so it kind of helps.
Yeah. Use what's there.
Yeah.
That's good. That you, instead of just playing like a solo or a scale idea, I'd like that. Where you play a note, bend to the next
Bending
one.
to the next note, yeah.
It's a good device.
Yeah, I really use that a lot.
And there's some more things where you're playing like a scale and you kind of sequence it. Do you have any advice for coming up with sequencing of scales?
As far as sequencing scales and things like that, I sometimes draw from piano books, piano exercises. Schmidt-Czerny comes to mind, and things like great exercises. And just very useful in opening the hands out. And another one which...
Yeah, you're sequencing just different sequences of the A major scale?
Just the A major scale, but obviously you can apply it to any scale.
Any scale, right.
In fact, if you use your imagination, it's also useful because in the book, it might just be done in C major, but then you can really apply it to every different key and every different mode and etc. Another thing I really find useful in opening up my hands before a show is just running up and down with the whole tone scale. So if we were to start in G, and you can see where the scale, an A scale, if you're just in the first position here, whereas with a whole tone, your hands really stretched out kind of nicely. It's also a pleasant sounding scale. It's really, you're going up like that with. And once again, you can move it around by.
Doing it as adding chromaticism to that whole tone scale?
Well, no, it's running whole tone the whole way, all the way through.
It's just sequencing it, right? Okay.
So that's I found that a very useful one to use. It really opens the hands out.
That's one of the great in-your-face guitar solos of all time, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, thank you. Well, I enjoy playing that one. It was also the first time, actually the second time, but it was, that I utilized the harmonizer in a different way than just a chorusing effect. And on this one, I use the fifth. So the solo starts just an A to G. And with a harmonizer, it adds an E to D on it, which gives it actually that in-your-face kind of feel, you know. And then the next part, which once again brings up the thing of having some kind of understanding of harmony, because if you're using a harmonizer and you're using double stops and triads and whatever, it's good to understand what the development of that sound by way of the harmonizer is going to mean. For example, on that we get. And what that does, that's really without the harmonizer, it's just, which is a real simple, normal thing. But what it does, what makes it really sound unique is, here we have just a normal D major triad with a D F sharp, but it becomes a D major seventh because you have the D and the F sharp becoming an A C sharp. So you get D F sharp A C sharp, giving you the D major seventh, and then to C major seventh. So it's a very useful tool, and used as an effect, I wouldn't recommend keeping it on all the time. You might have a problem.
Very careful.
Yeah, absolutely. So
this that thing you do behind the nut string pull, and that.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
I find that that's kind of a useful thing because, you know, if you're pulling up on your whammy bar, if I was to go. Oh, let me just turn this off for a minute. Has a different sound to it. And with a fifth, it has a real kind of. Same when it leads. So it's a really kind of I use
so you're actually playing what?
Playing a G string and just hitting up
That's
on.
it, huh?
Yeah. And it has, there's some really useful applications as well. For example, if you're playing whoops, wrong string. So you're getting the,
right.
just by,
Just isolating that one string.
exactly. So it's a very useful thing. But some guitars you can't do it with because you've got the clamped down nut.
Right, you bet.
So I kind of use that just for this guitar because I don't use a tremolo on this one.
So that solo is basically mainly A minor pentatonics, right?
Basically A minor pentatonic with a fifth on top of it.
Yeah,
and,
that really just puts it over the edge.
Yeah, and once again on the sound engineering side, just panned wildly from left and right. And as it's being panned, the reverb's doing this, so you've got this left to right thing, plus a reverb giving you the back and forward thing. So it kind of goes a bit crazy and, you know, provides for a pretty shocking kind of introduction into the song.
And then you end it with a speedy thing and
right.
a speedy little lick on top.
Where are we here now? Yeah, once again, just really basically the pentatonic with a couple of things thrown in. And with the fifth on top, it kind of changes the character of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds so beautiful on acoustic.
Yeah, in fact, the song was really built around with the idea of it being very much more electric, and it was just at the last minute I thought it would be nice in that area rather than doing an electric thing to throw in a in-your-face kind of acoustic part. Once again, based on the pentatonic, you know. And one interesting thing is halfway through the solo, you know, it starts off with one guitar going A minor. It's start on a D. And as it gets into this part, I add this as well. And down here as well.
And an overdub guitar, you mean?
Yeah. And I like overdubs to, you know, I think it's very effective to bring in subtle little things here and there to enhance, not take over, but just enhance. So
Yeah.
bringing that in there really kind of brought the end of the solo out a little more.
Notice there's another neat little thing you do with a open string type lick. I think you fret one note and then play it open.
Yeah, it's also sometimes a way of getting out of a problem. For example, there's on the last Yes tour there was a thing Rick Wakeman did from an album he did, The Six Wives of Henry VIII, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Oh, you should join me on that. Play it with me." And it was a pretty tricky kind of thing. And I said, "Oh, yeah." And then, until I started trying to work it out on guitar, I could play it on piano, but it's a very different, not under the fingers. So I worked a way of doing it with the open strings, which was a. So you know that's using just the open string like that. There's also other variations which, you know, playing again on G. There was a riff which is going to be on the next album. And using the open string just makes it.
That open G.
Plus
sparkles.
the open G, yeah, it sparkles and it's also is legato, so it keeps going and. kind of keeps the thing going, and you know, just doing it like wouldn't have the same effect. So that's a very useful tool to utilize the open strings wherever possible.
Yeah. Trevor, you're so much more than just a fine guitar player. You're a singer, songwriter, producer. Can you let us in a little bit on the Trevor Rabin songwriting process?
Well, very different ways. It runs a gauntlet, really. But as far as lyrics go, what I like to do, if I get an idea, a song idea with a melody, I'll just play and sing anything, but words, not just da 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 and da. You know, I will sing actual words, but whatever comes into my mind, and then I'll listen back to the tape and create the lyric based on what parts of that silliness works, just as the sound-wise, the way the words sound, the way they roll and everything. I'll base how I write the lyrics on that, and sometimes some of those lines, there'll be good lines, and say, oh, that's a good line, and I'll keep that one, and then work around it. And the reason I like to do that is it keeps the flow going, because if I have to stop and write lyrics, and I'm having a problem with the next line, it's very difficult to just keep the thing flowing. And I found that was always a kind of part of the songwriting process that slowed me down. I love doing it, I love writing lyrics, but it slowed me down, and when I started doing it this way, it's just so much faster. And I think gives the song and the lyrics, it's far more tied musically. The lyrics have a musical content, text in them, rather than just forcing these words on a melody.
Yeah. Rather than just a poem set to music or.
Exactly. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And you don't have to think. You can just be creative and just let it flow, and then after the event come in and sort it all out. So on a lyrical level, that's what I like to do with lyrics. And once as well with a lot of the songs I write will come from a sound that has inspired me. I'll get a sound together, and I'll draw on that sound and augment the sound and.
A sound you create in the studio? A guitar,
yeah, a sound. It might be a drum sequence. It might be a unique sounding guitar. Even just a chord. That might lead to something else, and I'll just kind of let it flow. And then once I've got it all happening, then I'll come and organize it. So I think that's really important, not to think about it in the initial stages. And once the embryonic stage has been developed, then you can come in afterwards and pull and pick and be the producer. But I think in the initial stage of a song, it's good to just let it flow.
Is that sort of the way that the recording process goes with Yes also? How does it start out? It varies.
With the 901 to 5 album, I know that before I joined the band, a lot of they would get ideas, and then they'd get together and formulate the ideas, and it would lead to the song. The song would completely change. That idea would change into something much bigger. Since I've been in the band, people have brought pretty much finished songs to the band, and then people will add their flavors to them. But it's varied. A lot of 901 to 5 was based on songs I'd written that were pretty much finished. I mean, "Owner of a Lonely Heart," for example, is pretty much the same. Even the production of it, the big bangs and pops and stuff that happened, that was on the demo. So on that album, a lot of it happened that way. Certain songs developed in rehearsal, and then there's the other thing, which is a great way of writing, is just jamming. And once again, this digital workstation I'm working with now is great for that, because you can get a 4-bar groove that the band does,
right?
And then if that's the only good piece, and if there's a 5-minute piece and there's 4 bars which are great, you can come throw it in here and then work on that and develop that. And then obviously there's a lot of the time we'll just do bass and drums, and I'll play the guitar solo and keyboard. The band will play, and what'll be kept is usually bass and drums and the solo, because I really like to play the solo while the band's playing. And
feel you get more energy that way?
Yeah, yeah. So many times I've come back to redo the solos because maybe I thought the sound wasn't that good because I didn't have the whole room to work with because a lot of the mics were being used for the drums. The drums were always the priority. You know, we get the bad side of the stick, the guitar players. You know. But in all seriousness, many times I've come back to redo the solo because I felt the sound hasn't been good, but the feel has been so correct, in my opinion, that I've stayed with the original take.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So Trevor, you started playing piano at age 6, classical piano, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate to be being born into a very musical family. My father was lead violinist of a pretty good orchestra for a long time. My mother was a piano teacher, and funny enough, the guitar is the only instrument I play that I haven't had a lesson on, and I really taught myself the guitar from the piano, and I think it's been very useful because in arranging some of the songs, I really look at the guitar a little differently, maybe than some people who've been brought up just playing the guitar.
Right.
And you know, I've studied orchestration and all that stuff. And it's, you know, I try and use the guitar for coloring rather than just to stand up on the podium and play a solo, you know, with my tight leather pants on. And it can be used, as a lot of people have shown, really to orchestrate a piece. It doesn't have to be the keyboard pad, and you know, the keyboards have been used so much for coloring, and they do that very well. But the guitar is also, I think, such an interesting way to color songs, and different ways of approaching rhythm playing, and you know, not just the traditional way. And I think it's always useful to look at things in a different way. And I also think it's also useful to learn the rules, because you can break them with a lot more confidence if you know them.
Can you think of any specifics in your musical upbringing that really stick out in your mind and help you develop as an artist?
Yeah, I think an important thing to stick in the back of your mind when you're going along this long road is of being a guitar player. Is there's some great schools to go and learn the craft, and books, and I think, but the most important thing is to keep in mind that you should really try and develop your own unique style. I think that's really the key. There are a lot of guitarists out there who are technically not good players at all, but they have a unique style, and you know, they've been very, very respected for that. And so I think that's really important. And the other emphasis I would put on is sound. It's not just how fast you can play or how many notes, and you know, I enjoy speed as much as the next guy, but you know, sound is such an important aspect. Without the sound, you're really cut off from a lot of ears. And so I would say that sound and style, having a unique style, is probably the most important thing I can say.
That's very good. I'd like to thank you very much again for letting us come down today.
Thank you. Nice that you came. I had a good time.